You will be joining the 1957 Billy Graham Crusade in New York City at Yankee Stadium.
More than 100,000 are here.
And now we have a very special guest this evening, and we're going to ask Mr. Billy Graham to come and introduce that guest for us.
I think the man that I'm going to introduce is probably one of the hardest working men in the United States. He has certainly brought new luster to the office of Vice President. He has become America's #1 ambassador of goodwill. It's been my privilege to follow in some of his footsteps in other parts of the world and found his popularity tremendous overseas wherever he has gone. He's a young man with vision, and I found him to be a man of humility and integrity and courage. And we invited him here tonight, and I think that whatever your party affiliation, and I'm sure that there are Democrats as well as Republicans here, that we all admire him as a great vice president and as a loyal American. He came from a Christian home. He has a Christian heritage, and we appreciate his taking time out of his busy schedule to be with us here at Yankee Stadium tonight. Vice President Nixon.
It's no problem for him to come because he's right in New York City. His television shows are coming out of New York City. None other than tonight we have a really big shoe for you. It's Sullivan. Oh, I know you don't believe me. But anyhow, we'll listen a little bit to Mr. Vice President Richard Nixon. Remember, the year is 1957. Nixon's vice president under Eisenhower. Crowd hoaxing, there's not that many there.
Dr. Graham, distinguished guests on the platform behind me, and ladies and gentlemen, may I first bring to this great audience here in Yankee Stadium and those who are listening on television and radio.
Okay, you're actually looking at Ed Sullivan. And to get you caught up on that, we'll go to my channel, Who's Who in Hoaxology. Now, I've tried to reserve this channel for just identification and not a whole lot of other fluff. So that's why I called it Who is Who in Hoaxology. So we'll just see a little clip here that Ed Sullivan is President Nixon. He folds his hands just like President Nixon. On this one here, I'm just relying on how he folds his hands, so you'll have to bear with me on this. Hey, this is a photograph of Ed Sullivan, the famous Ed Sullivan of the television show, the variety show. And one of the things that Ed Sullivan loved to do was to fold his arms. And oftentimes he would come out on stage and talk with his arms folded, or she talked, depending upon how you want to see these actors. And here's another photo of Sullivan with arms folded. Now, I'm not sure all the reasons why Mr. or Ms. Sullivan liked to do this, but it might have been because he or she had terrible intestinal problems. And I recall reading in a book that many times he had to, quote, pump his own stomach. So this character might have been in a lot of pain by standing in this particular fashion and then talking to people. So this is a rather simple video. I'm going to show you someone else who adopted that particular stance. I need to turn my light on and I think I got too much light there for you. So, take a look at this one. You know who you're looking at? Richard Nixon. Now you might be saying, I need more evidence. Well, there's a lot out there, and I have some videos on one of my channels where I will do a lot more with this. But this is just a simple, quick video based on stance. And the individual in this particular photo obviously likes to stand and get his photo with his arms folded, and that is Richard Nixon, President of the United States. Now you stop and think about it. When someone is going to take your photo, do you fold your arms like this? It was a characteristic of Ed Sullivan. So, my conclusion is, Ed Sullivan played the role of President Richard Nixon. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. Okay, now we're going to go back to the Billy Graham. Oop, there's Ed right there.
A message from one who is a very good friend of Billy Graham, and one whom I know would like to have been here if his duties would have allowed it.
It was easy for Richard Nixon to be there because the Ed Sullivan Show, Toast of the Town, all that, based out of New York City. So I want to take you back to some more evidence and back to my channel, Who's Who in Hoaxology. Here's another video I did. So I'm going to read to you from this book on page number 216. And the book is Pat Nixon. It's by Julie Nixon Eisenhower. So we're going to be right about here. In March 1963, they flew to the city to house hunt, and Ned Sullivan, the son of Mother's beloved cousin Catherine, in whose home she had met Dr. Duke for dates, met their plane. Although the flight was delayed until about 2 a.m., Ned sensed no fatigue in the Nixons, only elation to be back in New York. All right, so It is Ned Sullivan. Now they do things like that to give clues to people. Let's get rid of the N. Ed Sullivan. Now who is Ed Sullivan? None other than Richard Nixon. And who's at Richard Nixon's site? Pat Nixon, which is actually Ed Sullivan's wife. And I'll show you that photo here. Okay, on the far left is Ed Sullivan with his wife. On the right is Richard Nixon with his wife. It's the same. Ed Sullivan plays Richard Nixon. Ed Sullivan's wife plays Pat Nixon. And incidentally, in hoax history, it's always reversed. Ed Sullivan is a woman. His wife is a man. Richard Nixon is a woman, and Richard Nixon's wife is a man. Now I realize this is a little bit crude, and I try to do things as inspiration hits me, and I just produce them and put them up for view. Now if anybody wants to critique it, that's fine. If anybody wants to doubt it, that's fine. If anybody wants to tear it down, that's fine. Do what you want. I get inspirations, and when they come to me, I try to film so that I catch the thought, I catch the inspiration, and I give it to you. Okay, so you got that little portion of that film. We'll go back to the Billy Graham crusade. Again, this imposter here claiming to be vice president is just actually Ed Sullivan.
The greetings and best wishes of the President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Crowd hoaxing. There's not really that many people there. They just fill it in and make it look that way.
Now, Billy has given me permission to, as he says, say a few words. I preside over a body in which nobody says a few words. But under any...
Did you see the Ed Sullivan smile? All right, I'm going to take you back to the Who's Who in Hoaxology. And one little more video. I didn't use the Pictriev on Sullivan and Nixon. I think I might have on one of the other videos I did. But this one here I will show you Pat Nixon. Ed Sullivan is Richard Nixon. Pat Nixon is Ed Sullivan. Pat Nixon is Ed Sullivan's wife. Again, Who's Who in Hoaxology. So I'm just sitting here in my car with a cell phone and also with a book. And on the left you have early Pat Nixon and Richard Nixon. Kind of skinny. And over here we have sort of early Ed Sullivan and Pat Nixon. Now notice in this Nixon Sullivan, or Nixon, Ed Sullivan and Pat. Ed Sullivan and his wife with the golf clubs. If you follow the golf club down to her leg there's part of the M, and then her other leg and his leg, and that would give you your M for Mason. Now, also, golf clubs are magic wands. The one really famous for that is Bob Hope, carrying around a golf club everywhere he went. It actually was a magic wand, a rod, like in Exodus, the rods of the magicians of Egypt. Yes, there is power in the rod. And if you don't believe that, that's why Hollywood exists. It's the wood from which the magic wands were made, Hollywood. So hence you have magicians here, and you have supposedly Richard Nixon, supposedly Pat Nixon, who's really just Ed Sullivan and his wife. Okay, again, the channel that you can go to, maybe a lot of folks don't go there because I don't put too much on there. I hold that off for just sort of identifying people, is Who's Who in Hoaxology. And once again, back to the whole theme. It was from Billy Graham Crusade, the big guest appearance, Richard Nixon.
In any event, I know that all of you,
He had a really big shoe.
as well as I, are looking forward to
A really big
hearing
shoe.
Billy Graham tonight and not hearing me. But I do.
So the fact that Billy Graham can get Richard Nixon, vice president, to come and speak to his phony audience tells you that Graham has been in cahoots with the cabal system from day one. And it's interesting because he's always has these gigantic crowds. And what also is interesting is he's buddy-buddy with presidents, vice presidents, celebrities, you name it. You know why? Because he's part of the hoax lie system. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little excursion to 1957, and I'd like to thank you for watching. End of video.